Hello World Economic News people. First chart website here is the Case-Shiller Composite Index. In red it's the Composite 20, which started in 2000, and the blue goes back to 1987, the old Composite 10. You can see by the basic shape of it, it's not a double dip yet in US housing, but any recovery doesn't look on at all. It looks completely off at the moment. We'll just have to wait and see what that latest turn down is going to turn into, but we shall see. On that, the next thing is from Business Insider. If you live in one of these 8 cities, your house value just hit a brand new low. This is taken off the Case-Shiller, and you'll have to follow the link again below to see this, but I'll tell you what they are. I'm going to read them off the website. Miami, Florida in number 8. All these cities are now hitting new house price lows. Miami, Seattle, Portland, Tampa, Charlotte, Las Vegas, Atlanta and Detroit. So it's either good or bad depending which way you look at it. New York Daily News gives us federal budget cuts will hurt New York, decrease education funds and cut into MTA spending. Washington, the House Republican push this week to slash the federal budget to 2008 levels or less would be devastating for New York, lawmakers told the Daily News, and then gives a list of all the stuff, the ways that they would be hit by it. Later in the article we get Republicans argued they are just beginning the process and that cuts would be made sensibly, but they were not inclined to go soft on states with problems. They're acting all tough. There will be no bailout of the states, said House Majority Leader Eric Cantor. The states can deal with this and have the ability to do so on their own. They're just talking shit. It's playing politics. Very, very dangerous games. It's more of this matches throw woof job. Anyway, out of the States and into Australia and the Sydney Morning Herald. An article entitled Inflation Rate Drops to Decade Low. Low inflation in Australia. I pulled this out from the article. The fact that it was lower than expected had a lot to do with the positive impacts of the Aussie dollar, said somebody that works in some banking thing. We're just seeing the benefits in terms of consumer goods. In other words, the Aussie dollar's strong, so they can buy consumer goods cheaper than other people with weakened currencies. One of the advantages of having a strong currency. But there are obviously other negative effects. But that's a positive effect if you like deflation. But still watch out for that housing. So I was looking to see if there's any comment on that situation by Steve Keen down in Aussie land, and his latest article isn't about that, but it's got a slight link to it, and I've pulled off this chart which is US private debt to GDP, which is one of his favourite things that he goes on about. And the blue line, exponential trend till 2008, and the red line's what's actually happening. And you can see that the red line, what actually is happening in public debt, private debt, in the United States, it's not now following that blue exponential line. That exponential line would take us to that 100 trillion in the next decade that some mad money people thought was necessary. Well, it is necessary, and the fact is that the United States people are now not doing the patriotic thing and taking out more debt, and without more debt the whole thing falls apart. Yeah. Gollum. Ireland was Germany's offshore tart. Now that Mr. Cowan has lost control of his party, this is in Ireland, coalition and country, the Irish can expect to be bullied and hectored from all sides. It is more important than ever for Ireland to defend herself against the claims that she owes the rest of us. She doesn't. There could be a bit of a discussion about that, if you know what I mean. FT Alphaville, a sudden rise in Britain's debt to GDP figures, blame the banks. The Office of National Statistics has actually come out with the figures now. Net debt of lots of billions, equivalent to 60% of GDP. 60% of GDP, but if you include the interventions into the bank bailouts, basically, the 60% becomes 155% of GDP. And it's hard to know how to think about that. Interesting in some of the comments down below on this article. Add in unfunded pension liabilities like most countries have got. They've got the liabilities to pay out all these social security things, but no actual fund to do it with. And the PFI, the private finance initiatives that the UK have been really big into, going right back to the start of before Blair. Blair took over and ramped it up, and you're pretty much there. But then he says net debt, ? Don't these banks have corresponding piles of assets, however iffy? And of course they do, and they're not added into that figure. It makes it all very difficult. And a reply to that came in, the figures don't include government assets either. And that's a point, they are unfunded liabilities, but a government has assets, doesn't it? One of the assets being its ability to tax you lot. Another comment was, what? So it isn't the fault of single mothers, people on disability benefit, and reckless spending on work-shy scroungers that I had previously supposed? Damn! Which I thought was quite funny. So, moving to the Telegraph, an article on cue, PFI, 70 million bill for that's 70 million pound bill for schools that had to close. Taxpayers are being forced to pay almost 70 million pounds under the private finance initiative for schools that no longer exist. There's an awful lot of private finance initiative things lurking in the background in the UK. If it comes time that they become an issue, that's probably the end of the game. Guardian Co UK, I quite enjoyed this. Mervyn King, he's the boss man at the Bank of England, drawn into fresh row over IceSave collapse. IceSave was all to do with the Icelandic banking thing, and this, I draw this from the article. This is Oddsson, who was the head of the Icelandic central bank. I was very heartened to hear this and thanked him. It doesn't matter. That's from for a reassurance that King has meant to have given him. Oddsson said of King's alleged assurances, "This conversation is on tape. Usually we don't record conversations such as this one, but for some reason it was done in this case." And I think, well done, Iceland. We don't normally record conversations, but when we're talking to the Central Bank of England, the UK Central Bank, we thought we might just record it, just in case. Good work. And we get, you will have had it in the news, but the United Kingdom back in recession. No, stagflation, says this article, and that's the chart of real GDP growth or not in the UK. And we move to the Telegraph. UK economy shrinks by 0.5%. And the Chancellor, the head money boy in the UK, there is no question of changing a fiscal plan that has established international credibility. That's international credibility for the UK, on the back of one very cold month. In other words, the money boys are blaming the snow for the fact that the economy has gone bleh. That would plunge Britain back into financial crisis, the Chancellor said. In other words, we've got to keep going or it'll just be a mess. And finishes off confirming that with, "We will not be blown off course by bad weather." And he probably thought he was wonderfully clever to say that. It's a bit like Thatcher thought she was channeling Churchill, and now it looks like this. What are they called? Osborne and whoever they are anyway. Those leaders in the UK of things. They think that they're going to do a Mrs. Thatcher in the early 80s, where things were going dreadfully wrong, and she was pushing on with policies, and it just about came right-ish in the end, right enough anyway, and she was happy that she was not for turning. But just for the hell of it, the last chart here is UK oil production, and just have a look at the shape of it. And that's what got Mrs. Thatcher in the UK out of shit last time. These new boys haven't a clue what they're running into if they push on with this austerity. I'm not saying that they could do the opposite and keep borrowing and spending more like the United States are doing, but either way, they are in the deepest, direst of dark doo-doo. Bye.